The Evolution of Consciousness Part 7, the Encore. It is said that all of creation is but a ripple on an ocean within all of creation. Our technological senses, particle accelerators and electron microscopes, have taken us on a journey within the atom, showing us that everything is just energy. Why and how does this energy exist? Nobody truly knows. We only have the current popular belief. The most popular belief on deep reality at present has got to be the quantum view. The quantum view proclaims that the universe has somehow manifested from within. They call our four-dimensional playpen in which we live the explicate order. There is an ocean of potential energy that simply longs to exist, which is at 10 to the power of -33 within 1 cubic centimeter. That ocean is called the implicate order. It flows out with the tide of creativity, and then it returns with the tide of entropy and destruction. It is said that just as there is a vibration that forms cloud from vapor, so it is that there is a vibration that forms the explicate order from the implicate order, and that vibration is called the Hala movement. They say that within the implicate order is the super-implicate order, and within the super, there is the super, and this goes on like when you align two bedroom mirrors into infinite regress. Quantum theory plays the role of the bridegroom, carrying us the bride just beyond the threshold into infinite regress. The God-man hypothesis. There are believed to be 346 parallels between the teachings of Krishna and Christ, according to Kersey Graves, who was an author from Indiana that lived in the 19th century. Let me outline his findings below. Krishna, like Christ, was said to have risen from religious turmoil and social change, and as adults they went into the wilderness and fasted. Christ was in Judah, and Krishna in Sakhi, and both of them were seen as the lion of their tribe. In both teachings it is taught that God created everything, and both Christ and Krishna existed in spirit before birth. They were free of sin, and they had the qualities of an omniscient, omnipotent, omnipresent and benevolent God. Whilst they were here on earth they performed miracles of the same nature, like curing leprosy, the blind, casting out demons, raising the dead, performing baptisms, were gentle and merciful, were criticized for their association with sinners, forgave their enemies, had a Last Supper, were both seen as God's Son and as God, were saviors, and they were second in the Trinity. Their fathers on earth were carpenters, but their real fathers were spirit. They had wise men visit them at birth that were guided by a star, and they had a local tyrant who wanted to execute them, so their parents ran away with their babies to evade capture, where they fled to Muturia and Mathura, Christ the former, and Krishna the latter. They believed in an eternal life, and it was said that, if you follow their teachings, that you would never know death. Basically, the way to reach salvation was through them. However, Jesus' statement when translated directly from Aramaic to modern-day texts contradicts the last parallel, as it says that the kingdom of heaven is amongst us, and not within us as previously thought when it was originally translated from Aramaic into Greek. In other words, we can find heaven on earth with the unconditional love from community spirit. The original pagan teachings of Christ proclaimed that he was hung from a mistletoe tree at his death, and that is why that tree does not grow from the ground like other trees. This is paralleled with Krishna's death, as he was also in a tree when he died. Both were resurrected after their executions. They descended into hell at their death and then ascended into heaven after their resurrection. The symbol of the trident, which is Krishna's symbol, is not that dissimilar to Christ's cross. In a nutshell, it is a cross with horned arms. Further, Christ comes from the Greek word Christos, and Christos is the Greek word for Krishna. Krishna, according to the Vedic scriptures, is believed to have lived on earth in the year 3000, 228 BC. The New Testament has its disagreements that create differing fractions throughout Christianity. For example, what was the meaning of Jesus' phrase in the Bible, "In my Father's house there are many rooms"? Was it that he accepts all religions into heaven as long as they believe his teachings? Or is he expressing the different dimensions of his Father's house, that being of the earth, limbo, purgatory, and heaven? Or did he mean that the many autonomous fractions of Christianity that exists in the world are all welcome in heaven? Is heaven even spiritual, or is it physical? If so, did he mean that heaven is in Earth's future after Judgment Day, or that there are many Christian churches on Earth today that will also be welcome in heaven? Or was he simply saying to his disciples that there is plenty of room in his Father's house for everyone, so don't get stressed about his leaving? Ultimately, why did the Christians change it from rooms to mansions? Was it in reference to heaven transcending from followers to faiths? That the same story has been told in many cultures and in different times and locations throughout the world dictates that it is the teaching of the story that is important, not the teacher. So in these uncertain times we must share a synthesis of the story worldwide to bring about social growth and change that could benefit our well-being as we reach inner peace and global harmony. And let this be the catalyst for the redevelopment of our societies, so that we can all reap the benefits of life's natural harvests as our good God intended and find our place in a utopian setting in our future here on earth, either that, or beyond the veil and in spiritual heaven. Let us now see if we can create an outline of the much-needed hypothesis revealing our finale to create a contemporary story, where we can find that peace on earth, or heaven. When looking at the teleological argument, it has been a major religious criticism against creation to say that animals fit into their environment like a hand in a glove, so therefore, there must be a designer, or should I say a God. Now, if one does not wish to witness all that I have said and apply it to God, then there is one more avenue that I must traverse, and this, my friends, is in the Holy Bible, and if you did not know of it, or if you have not read it, and if someone told you of it, you would think it was prattle or evil gossip, for it is when the children of Moses, after they had suffered and endured demonic slavery by the Egyptians, crossed the Red Sea, lived off faith and manner for 40 years, that they were told to commit the act of genocide to all the pagans that dwelled in their new promised land. Yes, God told his chosen to kill or to chase away all the citizens of the city that already dwelled in their new promised land, and when they did not totally comply with his ethnic cleansing, because they could see the benefits of keeping some alive, he gave Babylon the power and responsibility to dish out his wrath in his wake. Now, they say hell has no fury than that of a woman scorned. Well, if that is true, then God must be one hell of a pissed off bitch, for Babylon sacked Jerusalem and not only incarcerated, but enslaved the Jews for 80 years for not carrying out his sadistic command. Well, he may have just as well turned back their history and placed them back into the evil pagans' hands of those Egyptians. Though I don't think that he wanted to spoil his past deeds, for not only would he have to resurrect those Egyptians from their peril of his unscrupulous power and the Red Sea, but he would have created a paradox, and everyone knows that God is not subject to contradiction, and the whole epic tale would never have been, and that includes the 10 Commandments, and so he gave Babylon the power of his wrath instead. Still, there is another possibility, and that is that our theological intellectuals have been pulling the wool over our innocent or ignorant eyes by pretending to know God's personally. Perhaps it was not garbled intentionally to gain money, respect, and absolute power. Maybe they have been deluding themselves by projecting their own personalities unconsciously onto a vast and complex universe. Therefore, we may as well stick to what we do know, and that is, if there is a creator, We certainly do not understand its personality, and that is why I personally value a spiritual force and journey. In addition to that, to follow any kind of deity with blind faith leaves no room for personal hypothesizing or conjecture, and I cannot see the point of having free will if we are not supposed to, or allowed to use it. I believe that one should follow what feels intuitively good and experientially right. If one has an interface into the future plan, then free will and probability could work together, and I think that, as suggested, if one can connect to one's ESP or intuition, this could be the cornerstone to my hypotheses. What I mean is that one can have an insight into the blueprints of one's karma, and the two can unite. In a nutshell, if one begins to listen to one's inner voices and cancels all the negative thoughts out as personal demons, and at the same time listens and works with the thoughts that promote positive results, be it self-developmental or caring for others, then eventually one should find a harmony within their unity. If one forgets, say, Jesus, Moses, Buddha, Muhammad and Krishna the person, and sets one's life journey to what was actually being said, one would find that underneath their own personal perspectives that they share the same sacred wisdom. Now, pagans were just limited to their local tribal environments, be it from their folklore and local mythology or their shamans or witches. However, even they unite with the teachings of the great masters, and in turn they all unite in the common good, and I think that Monty Python's film, which was called The Meaning of Life, summed it all up very nicely when at the end of the film they said the meaning of life was, remember to be good and try to be nice to each other, or words to that respect. There was a time before we understood the natural forces, and we believed that gods and mythological forces governed us and nature, and we used to say that our destinies were written in the stars. However, if one takes a look at it today, one can get a basic grasp on what is actually really taking place. On a nature program that I saw on TV, there was a species of crab that always made its way to the shore at a certain time of year when the moon was both full and bright. So, because of the light and gravity of the full moon, the shore was made visible, and the tide was at its peak, so a perfect environment was set for the crabs to reproduce at this time. There was probably a time when the crabs used to leave at different times to make their journey. However, the crabs that left on the full moon at that specific time of the year were the ones that were more successful, so it was written in their DNA. After a time, all the other crabs that did not follow the others would become extinct, and the successful crabs that now have it instinctually coded into their genes are the only ones to live and make the annual journey. Let me begin with astrology, and that I would like to state that I do not share the view of many of my friends of that we are determined and governed by the cosmos. I once had lessons, and it was okay until about 1.5 years into my studies. The problem occurred when we were being taught a different house system on the birth chart that we had been using. When I realized that there was no correlation with my life, and not even my hopes, or potential life, I asked the teacher about the problem, and she told me to stick to the old system and drop the new system that I was using. Now, that to me seemed a little too fictional rather than scientific, for it should not matter what house system is being used, it should display the same personality and past, present and future influences that orchestrate and govern our lives. For example, if it were an arithmetic problem, it would be like saying 3 2s make 6, whereas 4 and 2 make 7, when they should have the same answer, of course, which is 6. So, logic aside, I did what she had suggested and persevered with my study. Then, one day nearing the end of the but the last term, we had Michael Jackson on the blackboard, and everybody was freely associating all the symbols in his birth chart with his personality. I mean, the singer had a successful career and had dominated the media for several decades, and at that time he had been accused of being a pedophile. I was quite taken aback at how the whole class could find these correlations in his birth chart and I could not. Then as we were nearing the end of the lesson, the teacher's face glowed bright red with embarrassment as she declared that it was not Michael Jackson's birth chart after all and that she had made a mistake. She did try and save face though, for she mentioned that although it was not Michael's birth chart that it was another singer's chart, as if that would make amends. So, it was patently obvious that the students and even the teacher had been taking what they had gathered from the media and projecting that onto the birth chart. With that in mind, I concluded that astrologers probably project what they want to see with their universal symbols within their birth charts, and then project their conclusions into their readings. Basically, I think people that have busy lives that are full of common occurrences, situations and events, that those lives and events can correlate with the universal symbols on the birth chart, giving the illusion that astrology is real, and, if they do not have busy lives they will have no correlations, so it's not. Only the other day I was having a discussion on the subject with a friend and he was adamant that people seem to fit the perspective of their sun signs. He stated that he had often seen this in his living experience. My reply being, why do twins not share the same personalities, and when they grow why do they have different standards, friends, and lifestyles if they were born at the same time? Give or take a few minutes. Further, that if you get 12 astrologers together and give them the same birth dates that their readings will perhaps correlate with their subject's life, although from different perspectives, and maybe there will even be minor correlations between each individual astrological reading. However, the readings would not all be identical in their perfection, and this to me only supports my values on the subject that we as in humanity only see what we think we see, we create our realities. I told my friend that as much as he wished me to remain open-minded, he should also do the same and break free from any kind of dogma. I went on with that if one wanted to hypothesis on how conscious acts and situations arrive in life, then it would probably be a good idea to look at the political, psychological, and one's direct social and environmental impressions and influences from one's youth up to the present. One could postulate on, does one really have free will, or is one determined? One must also take into account that the constellations that supposedly influence us are many million light years away and their light or influence has traveled vast distances in space and time, and our lives are but a bat of an eyelid compared to their odyssey. So why give us more attention than a planet or star by creating our psychological, social, and spiritual lives here on Earth, the third rock from the sun, etc. Further, the basic argument of when we discover new planets that whatever was taking place on our world at that time is synchronistic to that particular planet's energy or power of influence over us on how we act, in what we do, and in what comes into or out of our lives, is most difficult to take on board. They say that when we discovered the planet Uranus on March 13, 1781, that the American Revolution in what was to become the USA and the Comunero Revolution in Colombia were taking place. So it was synchronistic with the discovery and meaning of the planet, and so Uranus became known as the planet of revolution. However, are they saying that before the synchronistic event that cultural revolution was inactive, or lay dormant awaiting our discovery of that precise planet? Of course, if we were determined, astrology would be the ideal puppet master to govern us, or pull our subtle strings. We know that before this so-called synchronicity that social change was, is and always will be an active part within our cultural development. The dialectic action-reaction process of thesis, antitheses, and the canceling down into the syntheses is what leads to the sophistication of our collective and individual consciousnesses, not a bunch of stars, rocks, and planets within in our solar system and galaxy. Well, that is what Hegel and even Marx dictated. You know, at first there is the caveman and the alpha male rules the roost. The weaker subordinate males have an opposing view, and eventually the conflicting views cancel each other out to create a view suitable for both of their needs. Next, it was with the slave owner and the slave, and we had the same conflict happening again and again within the family and the workplace, right up until the present day with capitalism. Although Hegel came with the view that the ideas were the catalyst and Marx believed in the materialist view, they both showed us that change was always afoot in the development of our social and world history, and that it was nothing to do with the cosmos. Let us suggest, coming from the divinity mindset, that they are saying that because of the revolutions in America and Colombia were taking place at the time of the discovery of the planet, it is a synchronicity. But surely the world is a big place, and the majority of it was not having a revolution on that particular date, so therefore, they should have gone with the majority and called it the planet of social peace and harmony if it were a true reflection of the day. However, one can recognize the truth that we are not determined by the cosmos. Nevertheless, if we are determined by stimuli, reflex, memory and habit from our interaction with our environment, why is it that we do not always follow what our experience has shown us? Basically, sometimes we go against our common sense, or our knowledge gathered from our negative outcomes of our past experiences. To simplify my point, let us say we make what has in the past been a bad choice, but this time we want to make it turn out differently, create an improvement the next time that we face it. It is quite possible then, with that hypothesis, to act against the grain, to outweed past negative experiences, giving us an appearance that we really do make our choices out of free will. It is these kinds of decisive actions where we learn to gain positive results out of hitherto fears and failures that make us stronger, wiser, and better people in our current lives and in our futures. How often have you heard the tale where a mother or father risks their own life by going into a burning building to save their offspring? Okay, one can say that they overrode their natural fears and instincts because it was their actual child that was in perilous danger. However, it is quite often that a heroic person will carry out the same act for a complete stranger. There are no personal benefits from that kind of selfless act, and they are certainly denying all their logical, instinctual, and common sense processes by entering the inferno. Even so, this happens more often than not. There has been a recent discovery that in our neurons, we have an area in our brains that helps us reflect in an empathic way. Feel what it is like, or place ourselves in other people's shoes. They call these genes mirror neurons. Taking this into account, one could say that this determines us to enter the burning building to help the stranger from their imminent peril. However, if we thought that we would not like to be in their situation, would not that be the main reason of not placing ourselves in the same kind of danger by not going in, as we could fail and both be enveloped within the inferno? There is one final possibility though, and that is that we have three natural drugs inside of us that are the natural form of the three major narcotics: opium, amphetamines, and cocaine. Endorphins are released into the system when the body cannot take any more psychological or physical pain, and it is vastly superior in strength to its botanical cousin, morphine. Adrenaline would be pumping the system as they carry out their task, as it does with all fight or flight situations, giving one maximum strength, agility, and alertness like that of amphetamines. Then, there is noradrenaline, and this comes naturally when one has achieved a goal of some kind, and it is often quoted as the reward drug. Its botanical cousin is cocaine. So, the final argument that I can think of then when siding with determinism is that heroes are natural drug abusers, and they are driven to fight the fury of the inferno and save the victim from their perilous fate because they are in need of a fix. Like a striker scoring their ideal goal at Wembley Stadium. Still, some would argue that if the natural junkies have picked up this understanding through their genes and past experiences, then perhaps they still have a choice in the matter, bearing in mind that not all botanical drug abusers have addictions, or addictive personalities. Plus, would they go to all that trouble to trigger the natural highs when they could trigger them in much safer conditions such as sport or sex? One must also value that long-term alcohol abusers can and do wean themselves off of the booze even when they are addicted. There is a battle between the drives that come with the addiction and the will that refuses to give in to their demands, and eventually the will wins and the addict is free of torment. Alternatively, one could counter with that perhaps a booze-free lifestyle and all its connotations could determine one to break free from the addiction of alcohol to live a free, independent life. On the whole, I do not think that the cosmos determines our choices, customs, and actions, and as for seeing into the future, I think that in order to get the full benefits out of divinity, one must have complete belief, faith, and wisdom in the divine. I myself use the angel cards when seeking spiritual advice, and the answers that are given are always synchronistic with the questions that I have asked. For instance, I have always seen myself as a writer, and to make the change from my secure life into an uncertain future was unnerving to say the least. Then, I shuffled the cards, cut them, and picked up the card that was in the middle of the pack, and it advised me to have faith in God and walk the divine path that had been assigned to me. I myself was in doubt about the angel cards when I did that reading because I was in fear at what to do with my life. I thought that I was just projecting sound advice onto my life and giving myself false hope in place of fear and insecurity. So I reshuffled the cards, cut them again with the same question, and the same card was drawn from the pack again, and my doubt was brushed aside because lightning never strikes twice, and what were the chances of the same card being drawn twice from the same pack? And this gave me the courage to let go of my fear and insecurity, with a leap of faith, and dive into my true destiny, which I did because of the divine advice from the reading, and I have never looked back. There was also a case with my cousin, Julie, who was going through difficult times after breaking up with her long-term partner. She had a reading from a psychic medium, and without any knowledge of what was going on, the psychic told her that she would be involved in some court cases as she drew the snake's card from her tarot bag. Then, lo and behold, about a week after the read, her ex took her to court over who should have custody of the children, which correlated with the snakes in her cards. She took a sharp intake of breath and said, "Another friend of mine called Ron, who also worked in a car park, had a tarot read, and it said immediate robbery, and that night he fell asleep in his office, until he was awoken from his sleep when a robber attempted to steal money from the kiosk. They only failed because the slide window was faulty and it fell off the rails and crashed upon the floor, waking Ron up in his office, who subsequently chased the would-be burglar away. Next, another friend who was cooking a roast for his girlfriend did a tarot read before he began, and it spelled out illness. So my friend checked the pork that he was cooking and it was off, so he threw it away, and then he did the reading again, and the illness was not there in the cards. I have experienced the different moods of the seasons and have heard that solar flares can create mood swings, which affects us mentally, emotionally, and physically, bringing on anxiety, depression, bipolar, and suicidal tendencies. I must stipulate that we are mostly comprised of liquid, and so, the gravity from the moon affects our emotional tides, giving rise to the myths of werewolves in the days of old because of our erratic behavior, hence the meaning of the word lunatic, or moon time. Further, if a child was born during a bombardment of a solar flare, or during the full moon, perhaps maybe, and it's a big maybe, it could affect the mood of the child and how it views its surroundings, and this could lead to a psychological imprint, which could go on to affect the child's future behavior. Ultimately, I cannot say that if astrology is true, Or not because I do not believe that our futures are always set in stone, let alone governed or determined by them, but I think that we do indeed have a destiny, or an infinite amount of potential destinies, and that we must all reach out and grab the bull by the horns and find our way. The angel cards give me insight into my potential future that in turn helps me to achieve my goals. Because with the foresight and wisdom that I get from the cards and knowing that every choice that I make shapes my future destiny, I can say that with divinity that we can witness God, find peace, and have our destiny in our own hands. Gurdjieff. Let me hand you over to the academics to totally explain G's teachings. G taught that in order to reach our potential, we must unite our upper and lower natures and create our souls. Basically, humanity corresponds to many levels of the universe, and from time to time it is said in this teaching that a fully developed, real human being has his head at the level of the stars, and his feet on the earth, which can be seen as either symbolic, or a ladder. He went on to say that one needs to understand that the two natures of humanity are inscribed upon this ladder. On the upper, it is the higher spiritual nature with its divine and intellectual qualities, and the lower it is the ordinary instinctual nature in which one manifests all of the time and is seen as one's entire reality. Gurdjieff suggests that if one is not aware of this dual constitution, and what the two natures can bring to each other, one cannot possibly understand the difficulties of one's true existence and why one is alive. There is an unbridgeable gap between the two natures because of the way that they are positioned on the vertical scale. And one's dilemma is to enable both natures that make up one's being to find a way to communicate and then to come together. So one must climb this ladder by giving the centers one's attention to make them become active and not passive. To achieve this, one needs the wisdom of those seekers of truth who have become conscious, and having attained this union seek to transmit information to the lower nature, which lives at the level of ordinary life, and this knowledge, or truth, can't be found, or obtained in universities. This knowledge suggests that the properties of the higher nature are the source of life, plus a higher and profound intellectual depth in nature. The higher nature seeks to discover a way to find unity with the lower ordinary nature, but basically, because of the unbridgeable gap, it finds it totally impossible to incarnate into one's present form as one is now. On the other hand, the lower nature also seeks to unite with the higher nature, but it gets lost in blind attempts, which conclusively suggest that both natures fail to unite because their qualities are so far apart from each other that it is near impossible for them to find common ground, and that they lack an interface, or a mediator, that their differences cannot be bridged and they cannot communicate and unite. Once this barrier is reached, one gets lost, if one doesn't receive the help of objective knowledge. And to overcome this difficulty, one needs to access the information that it is found within sacred science, the science of the Holy Scripture, such as Jacob's ladder in the Old Testament, and in the New Testament, Jesus, the Samaritan and the well, which signifies the ladder's lower and higher natures that one must ascend and find unity with in order to complete one's integration of one's centers and journey. One must desire the science of being, and must ask for it, know how to ask for it, and keep on asking for it from those who embody it, because if one is left to their own devices and tries to solve the enigma with either the intellect or feelings, even at the peak of one's intelligence, union cannot be attained because thinking can use, but it cannot invent data, and if one calls upon one's feelings, they will discover that feelings alone do not lead to union, and if they believe that the key to the problem is in one's body, one will go on to fail to achieve union with their instinct too. Individually, the functions are remarkable, although their role is to climb the ladder to seek unity, so they can then serve something greater. The secret to this is found in an attention of an entirely different quality, which has the properties of intent and a conscious attention. With most people this knowledge is so poorly, and so little understood, even though everyone has access to it, which fundamentally suggests that the basic idea is, I am attention, where attention is, there am I. If the attention is weak, then I am also weak. If the attention is mechanical, then I am mechanical as well, and if the attention is free, I am free too. One misunderstands when coming back to attention that one is just a being that is divided into two, and that attention is within oneself. There is a higher hidden and inaccessible attention of which one has no more power than that they have over the weather, or consciousness. However, there is an attention that communicates to one's lower nature, and this attention has fallen, and has become fragmented and split into divergent currents. One can attain knowledge of this attention even better than they know it now in the present, and recognize themselves in it, and can also come back and remember themselves because of it too. The channel that the attention takes are one's functions, which leads one to think, or begin to comprehend why it is said that self-knowledge is, or commences with the knowledge of the machine, the material world. The body machine is given to us so that one can try and recognize oneself as attention. And at this level of ordinary life there are three unconnected currents that come together, and each current of attention in one's lower nature can appear at different degrees of intensity. So one needs to ascertain that attention can show itself to have a completely unstable vagrant character. However, as I wrote above, there is a different kind of attention. An attention more conscious, or intentional. And that sometimes on very rare occasions one can experience it. And when this occurs in one's thought, they see that their thinking has become clear, and if it occurs in their feelings, they perceive a feeling of being completely free from habitual emotions, and as for the body, one experiences what is happening at this level too in a new, or diverse way. Each center consists of three levels, one above the other, which are a moving, or mechanical, emotional, and an intellectual level, and one must climb the centers to achieve unification. The knowledge of the communication between each of these centers, and each specific taste of attention is a secret, and when this is recognized and experienced, the path toward union, or reunification of the attention becomes obvious. However, one has to understand that these three paths must be experienced simultaneously, and that they can be achieved through their intellect, or meditation. When back to normality, it is possible to unify one's attention. As the three ascension centers of one's lower nature unite at the highest level, and one's attention gains a new character that has a conscious attention, or nature, which helps them to grasp that there is something in this regenerated attention that can relate to the properties of the higher nature, which subsequently leads to unification. Coming back to the two natures again, the higher nature should be active and have authority, and the lower passive and ready to serve. The higher nature remains passive, and the lower nature, which is clearly agitated by this, usurps the upper, and this arises from the separation, and the lack of any relationship between them, and there is nothing between the two natures to help them to regain their unity. Essentially, one becomes active when the real I becomes active, as opposed to a mechanism that becomes passive, and at each step one experiences the action of these shifts of polarity. When the highest level of the centers become active, one is now ready for a great event as one's whole nature. Now unified and ordered, begins to serve the higher nature, and becomes passive in comparison, and frees oneself from the oppressive grasp of the functions, and one's attention gains new powers, climbs the ladder, becomes intense, and then a new organization manifests, which is imbued with new qualities of thought, feeling and sensation that leads to a new spiritual body, which is relative to one's physical body, and is the previously missing intermediary element that is capable of merging the higher and lower natures, and so finally the two natures can communicate and be united. Back to the conscious realist and the New Age Gnostic perspective. God is man. Man is God. God is man. Which leads to eternal matter. Or God creates man. Man discovers and attains unity with God through meditation and contemplation with the serenity and supremacy of its nature that creates eternal matter from the unification from the spirit and the flesh that is full of free immortal spirits as one with all and everything that are the co-creators of. The simulation in the celestial play of eternal matter of which life emulates and is infinitely populated with all its fruits, imaginings and accomplishments from its creative imaginative flux. Spiritual enlightenment can be achieved through the unification of both God's passive and active nature, which is a combination of both Eastern and Western spiritual disciplines, rituals and practices which through the combination of the two, Oriental and Occidental hypothesis, one gets the recognition of God and becomes part of its memories. And the spirit gets activated for humanity and is through humanity's faith and spiritual wisdom that the simulation it's realized, hence God, humanity and all life create and enter the gates of eternal matter, which is in the eternal and infinite shores of all creation. A equals serene, which is the passive side of God, and B equals supreme, that is the active side of God. God creates life. Life creates the interface to the simulation of reality. That being, human portals that communicate and compete with each other as God discovers itself, so much so that gets totally enmeshed into the play and it looses itself into the game, and its characters receive their individuality and unique corporeal human qualities, and they become aware and alive. At death, God removes the headset and the self dissipates as it becomes one. Disassociates itself from the interface or reality, and it is absorbed back into the creative consciousness or the whole, and from life's karmic journey and with its creative imagination and its individual sequential and parallel life experiences, it creates eternal matter. Spiritual utopia, or the land of milk and honey, which is the unification of all life and creation within the realization of the spirit and the flesh. Ultimately, our personalities and God's creative essence and the recognition of its qualities impress or merge our personalities with our divine spark that helps creates our souls or our immortal human spirit as we become gods, and the catalyst for the simulation to self-actualize from an initial precognition, premonition, or a divine hypothesis that led to a spiritual pathway, where God is realized through us and all of its creation with spiritual utopia or eternal matter, at the edge of space and time, at the edge, or the dawn of creation in the land that was created from the simulation, which is the eternal and infinite land of completion, the spirit and the flesh. So in a nutshell, God creates the portals that projects the interface that creates the simulation that we call reality, and through fact functions and God's signals we mosey through life as we interact by communicating and competing as God works out its personal enigma, which is how to bring about the unification of the spirit and the flesh. That being the self-actualization of its aforementioned ultimate peak potential, and it is through our life experiences and our absorption at death that becomes God's memories that when mixed with its creative genius goes on to form heaven and hell, or the numerous levels of the ultimate reality, eternal matter.